Hello, fiber friends. I finished spinning some yarn. I have a lot of videos where I say, watch me spin yarn. And then at the end I say, and I finished it off camera and here it is. And people say, but Evie, we want to see how you finish it. So today, that's all we're gonna do is finish this yarn. And I'm gonna show you exactly how I do that, how I figure out how many yards I have, the reasons why I choose what type of finishing I'm going to do. And this is going to be a little bit like a back to basics Jillian-y video. Let's talk about niddy noddies. These are very old tools, actually. There's some medieval manuscripts that show pictures of people using these. There's even one with Mary. I think she's spinning, and then it has like baby Jesus with a niddy noddy. And these are the three I have that I use the most. This niddy noddy is from Ashford, and it is obviously the small one because it is for samples. This is very useful for traveling and small projects and sampling. It is 1 yard all the way around. So when I wrap my yarn around this, I multiply it by 1, which is a very easy math problem to do in your head, even if you're not a mathematical person, and then you know how many yards you've spun. Next, I have this one. This one is handmade by my husband, Mark. It was very simple. He took a large dowel rod and drilled a hole into it and then a hole into it. The key, if you're doing one of these, is that you want the holes to be slightly off center from each other. It makes it easier to wrap. And then he just stuck a smaller dowel through there and glued it. And now I have a niddy noddy. This one has about 2 yards around. It's a little bit more than 2 yards. I'd rather have a little extra than play yarn chicken in the end. So this one is definitely near and dear to my heart because it was made for me by my husband. I think it's a really great example of a simple DIY spinning tool. This next one I have is probably the one I use the most. This one was made by Shacked. I am a Shacked dealer, so if you're looking for a niddy noddy, you can find these in my shop. Full disclosure there. And so this one's adjustable, and I love that because at this size, it's 1.5 yards. And then there's little, you know, those little knobby things that you press in, slide it to the next one, and now it's a 2-yard niddy noddy. And if I want to travel with it, I can take it apart and it packs flat. So this one is very convenient, and it's probably the one I use the most, and it is the one I will be using today. Tools are fun and convenient, but you know, you really don't need much more than a stick and a weight to be able to spin yarn. I suppose you need something to spin, but beyond that, you can do so many of the finishing things that we do with fancy tools very simply. Let's start with the method I saw people use in Peru for winding a skein. They would have their not bobbins, but spindles, and their spindles would just kind of bounce around in the grass, and they would wind off the spindle that way. So 1 yard is usually about from your chest to your fingertips, so that's about 1 yard, and then that's about 2 yards with a little tail so I can tie a knot in it. It's comfortable to kind of hold it between my hands like this. So I tied that loop. So this loop is now like my template. The thing you want to do is make sure that the yarn you are winding crosses your hands in opposite ways. So this one is going to come under this hand and over, and then the opposite on this side, it's going to come over and then under. And that way you will have a loop. If you do it the same way on both wrists, where it's like under to over and then under to over and then under to over, under to over, you're going to create a cross in the middle. Sometimes people want that. It'll be like a figure 8. But if you don't, then this is how you can wind it up. And because I have that first loop that's like a template, it means that I'm not going to get smaller and smaller as I go, because I can keep my hands pressed open to the size I want it to be. And then it will create a skein, easy peasy, and you get a little upper shoulder arm action workout as you go. So very convenient, You don't have to have tools to do the fancy things, but if you want to have tools, you can. And let's see what that looks like. If you're a beginner, this can look a little confusing, but I promise it's not as confusing as it looks. Once you get it in your hands, it makes sense. So I'm going under the bottom arms and over the top arms, and then under the next bottom arm and over the first top. So under the bottom, over the top, under the bottom, over the top. And I just keep doing that until I go around a whole bunch of times, and then it'll be all wrapped up. So I don't count while I'm doing this. I count after I've wrapped it because I've tried to count as I go, thinking it would save me time and I'll know my yardage in the end. And then I get partway through, I get interrupted. I will measure the yards before and after finishing on this skein because I want you all to see how finishing it, wet finishing, can change your yardage and why it's really important to actually wet finish your yarn, especially if you're doing something that requires you to know the gauge, like a knitting garment or crochet garment, where it really matters if your yarn, when you wash and block your garment after you've made it, changes a lot. You might change the size of your garment and then say, what happened? Well, you didn't finish your yarn before you used it. That's what happened. And so I don't want anyone to be in that kind of a disappointing moment, especially at the end of a project. That would be a huge project to spin and then knit or crochet all of a whole garment. And then you're like, no. So I will count before and after and show you the difference because I think it's really interesting to see. If you're wondering what this yarn is that I'm wrapping up, it was a braid of Targhee. I just wasn't feeling the colors. They weren't really my colors, but you know, the fiber was great and I wanted to use it somehow. So I took out my blending board and I separated the colors so that I could blend up rolags that were the red color, and then I have all of the blues and greens separate. And I will be doing a project with that, maybe in the next video, I'm not sure, to show you how I used my blending board to make some rolags for that. But this is all the red stuff. And then I also added some brown cotton and some silk noil that was kind of like a dark burgundy color because it gives it sort of a dimensional kind of a tweed effect. And I thought it would be pretty, and I think it is pretty. So it was 2 braids. I don't think the colors exactly split evenly. I don't think I ended up with 4 ounces of the red and 4 ounces of the other colors. I haven't weighed this yet, so we'll see, because I was just separating it and making rolags as I went along. So we'll see if I have close to or more than 4 ounces. I might have brought it back up to 4 ounces because of my add-ins, but I do think overall that there was more of the blues and greens and less of the red. So we'll find out. I'll find out along with you. It'll be fun. This is about where we're at. Winding this off, just a little more to go. Once you get this kind of motion down, it's so easy. I can talk while I do it. It becomes muscle memory. Ta-da! Now it's time to secure this, and then I'll count and see how many yards we have. First, I'm gonna put some ties on this because I don't want it to accidentally fall apart. I don't use wool if I am skeining wool because it can stick together. And also, I found this perfect example. This is different, completely different yarn. It's not even the same breed, but look at the color. So if I tied up my yarn with that, it would be really difficult to see and it might get lost. So I use cotton, it won't stick to the wool, and I use a contrasting color. I have plenty of these Lydia's crochet cotton and they work great. You can just use the end to tie it up, but I've never been very good at that. So in keeping with I promised to tell you the non-money spending ways to do these things, you can just tie it up from the ends, but my figure eights never come out right. You'll see what I mean in just a moment, but it is an option. You want to have at least 3 places to tie it, and I start by tying it close to the end because I'm going to put the end in the tie in just a moment. But if you have only 2 spots, it can tangle and become a disaster. So you want to have at least 3. And the way I do this is I separate it in 3 sections and I flip it, so it crosses like that. And then I've got this section and then the next section like this, and I'll take that strand this way and that strand the other way, and then they can meet at the top. Now here, you don't want to tie it all the way down. Couple reasons. One, it can leave a wrinkle in the yarn, which might not be a big deal, but if you are dyeing your yarn and you have the ties too tight, you are essentially going to be tie-dyeing your yarn. So it's a good habit just to leave it a little loose, and that way I won't lose my end and it won't like unravel or do anything weird. I'm putting more ties around this than I need to so that I can talk on and you have something to look at. But really, you just need to make it secure, however much it takes to make it secure. Okay, let's do the next one. Now that the ties are all secure, I don't feel as worried that I'm going to bump it and have it, flip off or unravel or some disaster. So I'm just going to count the strands and I will tell you how many yards it is in just a moment. This is a weaver's trick. You can make your bundles after a certain number that you've counted. So for this first one, I counted 25, and then I can put my little crisscrossy thing here. I lost it. There we go. Okay. And then I can count another 25, crisscross it, count 25, crisscross it, or 50 or 10 or whatever works for you. And then once you have them all crisscrossed like that, you just have to count the bundles. Oh, there's 4 bundles. I have 100 strands or whatever. It just makes it easy counting reference later. And sometimes I do that just, so I don't lose count and have to start over. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that I have my bundles done, I can count them. So there's a crisscross right there. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 100. And then the last bundle was 27, which is pretty close. So 127 times 2 is going to be 254 yards. That's how many yards I have currently pre-wash. It's a nice skein. I do want to know how many ounces it is though. Let's count that. It's 4 ounces on the dot. This is just a bowl of lukewarm water. I don't like to use hot water when I'm finishing my yarn, and part of the reason is, especially if you're doing something from a dyed braid, hot water can break down the bonds of the dye and it can cause it to bleed, especially if it has anything that is silk in there. So use cold water or lukewarm water, and I like to put just a little bit of soak in there. This is the yuzu flavor. I don't eat the soap, I swear. I just put a little drip in there. I like the way it smells. So I just like to make sure it's nice and fresh. But it's not necessary. Just throw it in a bowl of water and you'll be good. I am pushing it into the water, but I'm not like rubbing or scrubbing or agitating in any kind of way. I'm just making sure that it gets thoroughly saturated. I'm going to let this sit maybe 15-20 minutes, and then I'll come back and show you what I do next. Why does wet finishing make a difference for this yarn? When I spun this yarn, I had made rolags on my blending board. And so that meant that the fibers were not all aligned. They were jumbled up in the rolag. As I was spinning, I was doing a stretching kind of motion to those fibers, or a long draw. And then the twist was added, which kind of held them in position. So when you put that type of a spun yarn where it's all jumbled up, but you want it to be lofty and full of air, when you put that type of yarn into water, then it allows that twist to kind of relax and settle, and it lets the crimp return to those fibers within the structure of the yarn, which is what we want because this type of yarn is supposed to be very lofty and full of air, which makes it insulating and warm. And when that crimp returns, then it can keep those little air pockets because the fiber is doing this instead of this. And so as it starts to do that, it's got these little tiny little pockets of air. And that also helps the fibers to move away from the center of the yarn because you have to put force on it to compact it into the center. And that's what you do when you're adding twist, which is why when you add too much twist, it starts to feel really stiff. So with this type of yarn, when we get it wet and it starts to get that crimp back and it relaxes a little bit, it opens up the yarn. It makes it loftier, as we mentioned, but it also makes it very bouncy because of all that crimp coming back into those fibers. And it can change the actual diameter of the yarn from pre-washing to post-washing. And we are going to thwack it next, which means that we are going to like smack it. And what that does, it shocks it just a little bit so that it doesn't fully felt and compact back down, but the scales of the yarn, of the fibers of the actual wool fibers, start to catch on each other, and that can give it a more cohesive fuzzy surface texture, which is we call blooming in yarn that like opens up and gets a kind of fuzzy halo. And that's what we want for this style, this type of yarn. So this would be a woolen yarn, and it is probably going to be lovely. So let's take a look. To move it to the next phase, I'm going to remove the extra water. There's different ways you can do this. You can roll it up in a towel and step on it. You can, you know, just hang it up and let it drip. I don't want to fling it around full of water though. So I'm going to use my salad spinner to spin out some of the extra water. Thing you don't ever want to do with wet yarn is to like wring it like a wet washcloth or something, how you would wring it. The yarn becomes more fragile when it's wet, and if you start twisting it, it puts a lot of that like tension kind of twisty torque stuff on the fibers and it can damage them. So you only ever want to press or centrifuge the water out of the yarn when it's wet. Just to mention, this is very red. This did have silk noil in it. I wanted to specifically point that out because I want to make sure that people aren't blaming the dyer for not setting her dyed braid. I'm really sure that came from the silk noil. So, all right, we've got the yarn in here, and I'm just gonna press it and let all the water spin out of it. I think I've managed to scoot everything out of the way so it won't get stuck on anything. And now I'm just gonna fling it around and let it smack on my bench. I'll turn it about like an 1/8 turn and smack and thwack and thwack. And I'll just keep doing that. It's kind of fun. My poor bench doesn't know what it did to deserve this. I can definitely see that the yarn is blooming. It's opening up quite a lot, and it looks much more consistent throughout the spin. Even the twist is looking more consistent, I think. I actually really like how this yarn's turning out. I'm gonna smack it a few more times just because it's fun. You know, work out some, you know, like frustration with the world and the way things are. And look, where the tie is, I didn't even put it loose enough. It could have even been looser because this is filling out and fluffing up around that whole area. But I can definitely tell a difference in this yarn in the way it's opened up and just the consistency of twist. Like the way you can tell if your twist is consistent is if you can follow the line across all the strands. And a lot of people have a harder time with consistency when they are doing more of a woolen type of yarn, but don't look at it until it's finished because you can't really see until it's finished. I'm gonna take this beautiful skein of yarn outside. It's a beautiful day. There's a little breeze, sunny. It's like 80 degrees out there. I think this will dry quickly if I hang it up out there. I did want to mention, I don't hang my yarn with a weight except under very specific, usually like warp types of projects. But for this type of a lofty woolen knitting yarn or crochet yarn like this, I would never hang a weight on it because that'll stretch it out. And then the next time it's wet, it's going to go back to its non-stretched state. And you can't hang it with a weight if it's in a garment, which means the whole thing's going to kind of shrink up. So I treat it the way it's going to be in its finished project. And if that means lay flat to dry, that doesn't have a weight on it, so I'm not gonna wait it to dry and then later lay it flat to dry because you get it. I'm gonna go hang this up now. All right. The yarn is dry and it is so fluffy. I was worried, and I think I talked about it, it was 2 days ago now, about making sure that the ties on the yarn were real loose because this kind of woolen yarn is going to puff up when it's finished. Yeah. Even with being able to stick a finger in there, it still is kind of choking off the yarn. So that's definitely something to be aware of, especially if you're going to dye it, because you will get a tie dye. I also mentioned that I would recount my yards when it was finished because I was pretty sure it would change. I can't just count it here because it's obviously going to be the same number of wraps. So I'm going to have to reskein it to count it. But if you look at how bouncy this is, I'm sure we lost a yard or two because this is very elastic, very bouncy, very elastic yarn. And it's squishy. It's lovely. I really like it. But it's definitely squishy and bouncy, and it got that bounce by like shrinking up in the finishing process, which is what we wanted. And it fills out the yarn. So it's much more, oh no. I just saw. I messed it up when I was plying. Look, it has a little pigtail. That's okay. I'm going to show you how I fix these. It's very sneaky. I untwist it. See that? It was curled up when I was plying it. So I untwist it for a little ways, and then I grab the strand that has the pigtail in it. I'll do this here so you can see. And then I pull it so that it kind of straightens out. I'm gonna untwist a smidge more, and then I'm gonna pull it so it kind of straightens out. And it's a little loose there now. That's fine. Like there's extra, trying to keep it in focus. So there's extra material here now because we just stretched out the pigtail part. So this ply is a little looser, but that's okay because we don't have a pigtail. And now I'm going to let that twist come back in there. I'm going to tug it a little to kind of distribute that twist. And the pigtail's gone. Still has a little slub right there. It's like a little thick spot. So if you want to, you can just kind of rub it a little, and that'll kind of felt it together so it won't like be very splitty in that spot that gained extra. There we go. This is where the pigtail was. It's kind of got a little bend there now, but you can't see the pigtail and everything looks even. It happens to everyone, and it happens to me when I'm flying too fast and I'm not paying attention. So I'm gonna stick this on my yarn swift and then get to re-skeining. This time we had 118 wraps, which on the 2-yard niddy noddy, we double that and we get 236. 236. So it did shrink up a bit, and that is important if you especially are going right up to the edge of yardage for a project. But I am really happy with how this turned out. I don't have a specific plan for it. I am thinking it's, you know, it's enough yardage to be a contrast color in something, and I like the dimensionality of it. I think with the right complementary color, it could be something really pretty and a little bit more me, like if it shifts a little bit more pink purple, like my apron kind of. So it is gonna go in my stash. I'll put a little tag on it. If you have any ideas about what I could do with it, I would love to hear all about them down in the comments. I'll see you there, and happy spinning.